And to this, the ECD sector in early childhood development sector in South Africa was devastated by COVID-19. A necessary short-term solution to the problems faced by the sector came in the form of the ECD Employment Stimulus Relief Fund, supported by the Presidential Employment Stimulus. The fund allocates 486 million to be paid in small grants directly to 108,833 ECD workers, and is intended to enable ECD programs that are struggling financially to reopen their doors. The Real Reform for Early Childhood Development campaign aimed at promoting significant reform for the ECD sector through advocacy and action and education is not happy with what they term poorly drafted ECD chapters in the Children's Amendment Bill. We're now joined by the Real Reform or ECD campaign spokesperson, Mziwamadoda Badi, via Zoom. Mziwamadoda, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us today. What is this campaign about? Why? What's the campaign about, and why? When did you launch it, and why?
Yes, good day to you, Desiree, and good day to the viewers. Yes, the Real Reform for Early Childhood Development is a campaign which was launched last year in October towards November, when we were really pushing for submissions which were intended to be submitted on the 27th of November last year. It is a campaign which is developed or is driven by a number of organizations which are ECD sector organizations that exist around the country. And our pertinent question basically was more on how the Children's Amendment Bill was drafted, which we saw a point that really it was poorly drafted. It didn't really address the significant issues that we thought that a government would really attend to. That has to do with the issues of registration of ECD centers, issues that has to do with the infrastructure development, issues that has to do with norms and standards, how they affect those that do not even have the privilege of having resources. So basically, really, we put our energies and efforts in making sure that we influence decisions that are taken in Parliament, particularly in the Portfolio Committee of Social Development, to come to the understanding that the Children's Amendment Bill is only meant to really change the narrative that really that ECD is not just a sector that doesn't really benefit the sector, but we want that really change now. We are saying the only time to make the real reform is now, and we're really pushing for that effect, and we are pushing for convincing and making sure that we mobilize the entire society of the ECD sector to support these real reforms.
Generally, government, especially the Department of Education, really puts a lot of emphasis on ECD as an important phase of the education life of South Africans. So which parts are you unhappy about? Is it the policy part? Is it the budgeting aspect? Which specific aspects are you not happy with? Is it the legislative space?
I think that it's a very good question, but I'm going to answer your question in twofold. One, the campaign was mainly focusing on the legislation, which is the Children's Act, and how it affects the development of the early childhood development in the sector. However, I do want to put it to you that every time politically they would speak, I would assume that is rhetoric, because they would say that early childhood development is one of the important sectors in the country, but really in terms of legislation and effort, they do not put significant effort in making sure that it's attended to. And in terms of informality, they've spoken about a number of issues to say that they would want to formalize the sector such that it has a structure and content and is regulated within a point where it finds expression. Because when we talk about the first 1,000 days, we don't just talk about the first 1,000 days, but we're saying that if the first 1,000 days are not attended to in terms of the stimulation and the human development of children, we're really putting ourselves or shooting ourselves in the foot as a country if we talk about development. But to come to your second part that has to do with funding, the funding is a different aspect altogether, because if the regulations are not put in place according to the point where we are saying that the process to which registration is structured is therefore depriving those that do not have resources to then get the funding from social development. I'll put it to you that the Children's Act currently, it says that if you take care of children that are more than 6, then you must therefore register as a partial care facility. And there are norms and standards and requirements and minimum standards that guides that process. But if you look at those standards, they actually deprive the ones that really are in need of that funding. Hence, in our five reforms, we advocate for that the norms and standards must be clear and they must make sense. They must then benefit the sector. And secondly, we therefore argue that the process, it must not be a one size fits all. We're saying that there must be a one-step registration, which is going to give significant changes in the process of allowing those that do not have a capacity with support from all the sectors that have an interest in the ECD sector so that they are able to register and actually get this funding for social development. We further argue and say that we see that it's important that all those children that are found in the ECD centers, they must be eligible to get funding. Because by them getting funding, then it means that the sector itself, the centers, they are going to have all the capacities and all the resources that they need in order to provide the stimulation that is required in the centers. And therefore, we're saying one of the issues that we've always also further discussed, we said, the issues of qualification, providing support for qualification of ECD practitioners, it must be something that is uniform across the country. It must not only by those that are affluent, they are living in cities that they get ECD level 4 or level 5, or even a diploma for that matter. But it must be those that really are in need in the rural areas, in the most distant areas. We talk about the Umnambiti, in Ladysmith, in Kwagwa, in many of them, in Kanduli. Those are the most people who really are in need of this sector. So the issue of an ECD center or ECD sector as an important sector, it must not be rhetoric. But what therefore we're arguing to say that government must take this issue very seriously, and they must work with the partners that exist within the sector to make those significant reforms in the country.
I just want to ask you about these 5 reforms that you're talking about. 2 things. First, are you in agreement with other stakeholders in this sector that these are the really important parts that need to change for there to be progress in the sector? But second, what is real reform doing to ensure that they find expression in conversations about the amendment of the Act?
Yes, thank you. I think the first part that which I want to attend is, in your question is that the 5 reforms, indeed, they're getting a lot of support from all the partners that exist within the sector, particularly in the civil society movement. And even when you look at who is involved in the campaign, it's quite extensive that it is supported directly by the grassroots level, particularly the practitioners on the ground, and also the support organizations that really have a direct interest on how particularly the Children's Act is taking shape. So I do want to ascertain you that really the real reform has a lot of support from the ground, and particularly now by those that really work on the sector. We on the second part on your question, we want to address particularly now to say that the influence that we want to put through, we are running a lot of campaigns. We are writing to Parliament. We have got a lot of communication, direct communication that we are writing to Parliament, particularly. They've written a statement, I think it was on the 6th of March, if I'm not mistaken, to say that they are rejecting the ECD clauses that were in the Children's Amendment Bill. However, we took that as a green light for us to say it's about time now that our involvement, our efforts, they are seen to be working, because it's now that we're pushing also that Parliament must be able to hear our concerns. They must call us, must make us part and parcel of the decision making, so that we influence the direction and the posture at which the Children's Act is going to take as we're moving forward. Because we're saying if these 5 reforms are achieved, we are going to be in a position where we provide adequate education and stimulation to the children that really are in need of these children. So I do want to assert the communities, particularly the ECD community in the country, that they are in good hands. The real reform has done a lot of work, and of course we have not done this a lot of work without consulting particularly the ECD practitioners on the ground. We are in constant communication with this sector. We are in constant communication with the partners on the ground. So it is a campaign which is driven by consultation. This is a campaign which is driven by consensus, and we're happy that also that in the latest communication from Parliament, they've indicated that also that they will want to put us to come and speak on the oral hearings to put our case in order, such that our suggestions and our points of views are put into effect, particularly when the Trans Act is amended and signed by the President, whenever the President would decide to put the process through.
Mziwamadoda, time limitations, a quick one. What have been the impacts of COVID-19, the pandemic, on this space?
Certainly, the effects of the COVID-19 are dire. The sector is really struggling. I'll put it to you that now that there are still centers that have not opened ever since March, when the first lockdown was put into place. Not because those people do not have a drive to open, but because sometimes the resources that are put in place, they are not there. Because last year, we assisted the Department of Education, of Social Development rather, to create norms and standards to allow the ECD centers to open according to the regulations that are set out by government, particularly in terms of the Disaster Management Act. So we're saying that now we're really calling on government to come to part in terms of assisting these ECD centers. We're doing our bit as the sector, and we're saying that the ECD centers, they need their support. But we are happy that also that there's been a presidential stimulus package that has been put in place. We are assisting in that regard as well. We are putting our efforts and resources to make sure that these ECD centers, they are getting their money as soon as possible. But we want to also further say to the government that the real reforms are therefore to assist them, are therefore to enable the center to become a better sector, and particularly the center, once it's regulated in accordance to the law, and the law that really enables the process, we see that the children of the country, they are going to have a proper appointment with the future.
An important sector in terms of kickstarting education for South Africans. That was Real Reforms for ECD campaign spokesperson Mziwamadoda Badi.